Welcome to Reason and Theology, everyone. I'm your host, Michael Lofton, joined by co-host William Albrecht. Pleased to announce we have our guest here, Roy Schoeman. How are you, Mr. Schoeman? It's good to see you.
I'm okay. Thanks for the invitation.
Good. Yeah, like we were saying off the air, I've spoken to you before. In fact, I was on your show a few times. We did one on the papacy and one on typology, to my recollection. I think there might have been a third, but I'm forgetting offhand what it was. But yeah, I'm glad that we're able to team up again and discuss today Judaism and Christianity. So maybe could you tell for our viewers and listeners what exactly is your background with Judaism and Christianity?
Well, I'm Jewish. I'm in the Catholic Church now. I consider myself a Jew in the Catholic Church. I did not consider myself in the Catholic Church growing up. I was, purely Jewish, and my parents were both German Jewish Holocaust refugees, and I grew up in a very Jewish world, very separate, and quite religious, fairly religious, not super religious, but certainly kept kosher and kept the Jewish holidays and went to Jewish religious education from the beginning of school until university, and took things very seriously in Judaism. And then actually, when I was in my late 20s, actually probably early 30s, I was a professor at Harvard Business School, and I was depressed because life had no meaning. If being a professor at Harvard Business School doesn't give life meaning, there's nothing to hope for that might give life meaning. So I was really more depressed than I had ever been because, there was nothing more to hope for. And God, I was atheist by that point. I lost my belief in God at university. I went to MIT, so that's a good place to become atheist. And so I really didn't believe in God. Maybe I was agnostic, who knows. But anyway, he answered my unspoken prayer to reveal himself to me. And I was walking in nature. I had an experience, a true theophany. I mean, it was an intellectual vision or something, but I found myself very consciously aware of the spiritual world, actually seeing the spiritual world and seeing my life and being in a state of communication with God, as though I had died and was looking back over my life in the presence of God. And that changed everything because I basically knew all the fundamental truths of Catholicism in that experience. I didn't know it was Catholicism. I still was very anti-Christian and anti-Catholic, but I knew all the truths. I knew the truth of divine providence. I knew the truth of God's love. I knew the truth of heaven. I knew the truth of the moral content of every action and the merit or demerits we'll get for it, and so forth. And so, anyway, it changed everything from one moment to the next.
Wow. I want to ask you a couple questions here because you mentioned several things that really caught my attention. Number one, I think you said your parents were both refugees from the Holocaust, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. From my experience, it seems that a lot of people who kind of come from that background associate what happened to them with Christianity. So what was their reaction whenever you told them that you're converting to Christianity?
They weren't happy. That was bad.
Yeah.
It was, especially coming from my father. I mean, but yeah, it was pretty bad. I mean, it was about as bad as it could be. After about 6 months or so, they relented and tell the truth. I know this is very politically incorrect to say, but it's your show, so it's you who got in trouble. It's not me this time.
Go ahead.
I just got kicked off of YouTube, so I feel like I have a badge of honor.
No, you go ahead. Say.
But the way I thought of it at the time, once they got back in touch with me, once they resumed communication with me,
right.
Their attitude was as though I had told them that I was homosexual and I was in love with another man, and they had come around to the point where it's like, oh, this is terrible, but he's still our son and we have to love him.
Because there's two problems here. Number one, there's often an association between what happened with the Holocaust and Christianity, and number two, just leaving the Jewish religion period is usually taboo. So, I imagine they were doubly shocked.
Yeah.
But I guess there was really no way to break that kind of news. You just told them, look,
Well, no, I waited 3 years. I waited 3 years. And to tell the truth, the way I broke the news was I was staying at my parents' house when they weren't there, and I left a letter for them. So I was pretty cowardly about it.
Now, one kind of side question that I'm going to ask here, and then we're going to get back to your testimony. Why do you think that so many people in the Jewish community associate Christianity with the Holocaust?
I think they're right. I think they're right. Mm-hmm. How can I put this? The impulse behind the Holocaust was a pagan, demonic, anti-Christian impulse. Mm-hmm. If anyone's read my book, I have a copy of it here. Salvation is from the Jews. It's a big theme in the book. I mean, the intention of the Nazis of the Third Reich was to stamp out Christianity, start with Judaism, but eventually get to Christianity.
Right.
However, in their attempt to stamp out Judaism and to exterminate the Jews, the ground had been somewhat tilled by historical Christian anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. It was not, tilled is a good word for it. It had already been turned over, and a kind of sympathy to anti-Semitism had been created. What's the name of that town? Oberumgau in Germany, where they have the, during Passion Week, they always have a play. And certainly until after World War II, it wasn't safe for a Jew to be out of doors during Passion Week and stuff like that. And there was a lot of historical anti-Semitism, which is associated with Christianity, and actually which came from I have to be careful. I can't say came from the Catholic Church, but came from the popes. So, are popes Catholic? You tell me. How much trouble can I get you into tonight?
No, go ahead. You're free to note anything. This is what I'm curious about. In fact, I had Dr. Michael Brown on the show. I imagine you're familiar with him.
I have the world of him. Now, why didn't you convert him? Why didn't you evangelize him?
we tried to, but he wasn't having it. We were talking to him about the canon, among other things. And
we'll try again to convert him.
Yeah, and you could tell he didn't really want to engage that much further. So, but anyways, one of the questions I asked him was this very question, because I'd like to hear both sides. I've listened to the Catholic side. I also would like to hear, coming from the Jewish side. So, you're free to say anything.
Side. I won't tell you the Jewish side. I won't tell you the Catholic side. I'm sorry, but I'll just tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And what infuriates me is all you get is the Jewish side, essentially apologetics, and the Catholic side, essentially apologetics. And the problem with apologetics is you're trying to win the argument. So you're saying everything that's on your side and ignoring everything that's on the other guy's side. And that's not the truth. And Jesus is the truth. And he's my master, and he's the one I want to serve. So I'm not interested in winning the argument for one side or the other. I'm interested in winning the argument, winning his side.
Absolutely. Yeah, so, if there's anything that's wrong with the Catholic side and faults that need to be admitted.
Well, I don't want to say the Catholic side. The professional Catholic apologists who deal with this.
Yeah, right.
And I face that all the time. It's like they're, for instance, putting the Jews in the ghettos and requiring them to be in the ghettos and not allowing them to live anywhere else was just to protect them. It was just, a charitable movement, because the popes were afraid that people might attack them, so they had to be locked up.
I heard that one.
Did you hear that one?
Pretty bad one. No. That's a pretty bad one.
Do you know the ghettos, were by papal command, because they were the papal states, right before the Risorgimento in the late 19th century. You know that. That, I mean, not all your listeners know that, or viewers or whatever. But basically, Italy didn't exist. You had independent city-states like, Venice and Bologna and Rome and Naples and so forth. And they were like independent city-states, and they were they were papal states. The Pope was the secular leader of all of these papal states until a Masonic anti-church revolution in like the 1860s, 1870s, one by one conquered the papal states and unified them into what's now Italy. And so the question is, okay, in these papal states, in most of the papal states, the Jews could only live in the ghetto. And the physical constraints of the ghetto, like in the case of Rome, had been set like 400 years earlier. Population had expanded, so the Jews in the ghetto in Rome were living probably 4 families in a 1 or 2 bedroom small apartment. And they weren't allowed to live outside the ghetto, and they had to be locked into the ghetto from sundown to sunup, and so forth. And so here's the question. The question is, when did the Pope, as the ruler of the papal states, emancipate the Jews and let them live anywhere outside of the ghetto, and actually let them, have normal jobs and live in the rest of Rome? You know the answer to that?
I don't.
1550, 1720? No, never. It waited until the overthrow of the papal states. So essentially 1868, when the Pope lost. I may have that off by a couple of years. I don't think so, but maybe it was 1871 or something. But basically when the Pope's army fell to the revolutionaries and Rome got turned over, was actually the Pope was actually the prisoner of the Vatican at that point, and the papal states were liberated into this Masonic, state of Italy or whatever. That's the first time the Jews were. I don't want to, without getting technical, because they were let out for about a year or two at one point, but then they were, then the ghetto was reinforced or whatever. Yeah. So anyway, the people, the chief rabbi of Rome, Israel Zoli, who entered the Catholic Church after World War II. A lot of people know that story because he's a poster child for Jews entering the church, because he was the chief rabbi of Rome and he became a very enthusiastic Catholic. He had a vision of Christ. It was a very earnest conversion. But, his father had been imprisoned in the ghetto. In other words, this is an ancient history. Somebody who died in the 1960s rather. Basically, people of my parents' age, their parents, if they were in Italy, had firsthand experience of this. So anyway, I don't know what the question was. Who knows?
No, you answered the question, because we were talking about, basically the Catholic disposition towards Jews, historically. So you definitely engaged that well. You also mentioned that you had this experience where you encountered, it sounds like you encountered Christ, and you began to understand Christianity by, I guess, divine illumination, I guess you could say.
No, I encountered Christ. So I knew the truths of Christianity. But during this experience, you probably know the story. It's water. It's okay.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
It's straight from the Roman ghetto. When I had this theophany, I want to know the name of the God who was revealing himself to me, who I knew was my personal Lord and Master. I prayed to know his name, and I literally prayed, let me know your name so I know what religion to follow. I don't mind if you're Buddha and I have to become Buddhist. I don't mind if you're Apollo and I have to become a Roman pagan, as long as you're not Christ and I have to become Christian.
Right.
And I literally prayed that, and he didn't reveal his name to me. And I didn't see him in his humanity. I saw him in his divinity, so there was nothing that identified him as that guy back there in the icon. Kind of hard to point because the image I see is mirrored. But anyway, no, I came out of that experience still anti-Christian. Sorry, but very much in love with Christ. I just didn't know it was Christ.
And you also had an encounter with the Blessed Virgin Mary. Could you talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, that's what actually blew the lid off and made me face the fact that this was Christianity. Was a year after that first experience. I went to sleep and I thought I was woken up, and I had an experience with the Blessed Virgin Mary that I thought I was awake for. I now think I was asleep for it, but I thought I was awake at the time. It felt like I was awake. And after that experience, I was never that dumb. I mean, if this is the Blessed Virgin Mary, and I actually really saw who she was, and I felt her love, and we spoke. I mean, I don't know. She said she'd answer any questions I had, so I asked her a series of questions, and she spoke to me for maybe about 20 minutes to a half hour. And after that, of course, I knew that it had been Christ in that first experience. So then I knew that the jig was up and I had to become Christian, like it or not. And there was a year in between that first experience and the second experience. And that year was long enough for me to, to some extent, I don't know how to put, soften my resistance to Christianity.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe tell us a little bit about the discussion that you had. I'm very, very curious about that. I've heard it before, but refresh my memory, and also for anybody who's watching who isn't familiar.
Well, she said she would answer any questions I might have for her. So I asked her about 6 or 7 questions, which she answered. And then she spoke to me for about another 15 minutes. And then the audience was over. And after, from the course of that audience, first of all, I had felt the love from her. And I had also experienced her, I don't know what the word is, exaltedness, magnificence, glory, to the extent that I had a lot of trouble believing that she was not divine, believing that she was just a person. She set me straight about that. That was, in fact, one of the questions I kind of asked her. But we know she's the Queen of Angels. We know she's above the angels. And we know that, like, when an angel appeared to St. John, his first reaction was to fall on his face and start worshiping the angel, because, it's really something.
Sure.
And the angel said to him, don't do that. I'm a creature like you. So anyway, it wasn't obvious, to say the least, that the Blessed Virgin Mary had no intrinsic, I don't know what the right word is, but no intrinsic superior. Yeah.
Divinity.
Because her role certainly is, but I don't know what you call it, but her, her nature was a human nature.
Sure. Now, so after this conversation, I mean, I imagine this profoundly impacted you. Where was the first place you went? Did you just go to any church, or did you start going to a Catholic church? What exactly happened?
No, I mean, you would have to drag me kicking and screaming into Catholic church still. I spent time in a Carthusian monastery, and I was still anti-Catholic. So go figure. Wow. No, I opened a phone book and I found a local church to go to, and it was a pretty innocuous church, let's say. It was not. It was what's the word? It was a unconventional, nonconformist kind of Protestant church. So it felt somewhat safer than if it was a real, well-established denomination like Lutheranism or, Baptists or something like that.
And you spent some time with the monks. How did that go? I mean, as I understand, I think they're generally pretty silent. Is that not right?
Like totally.
Yeah.
The argument.
How does that? What was that like?
It was really wonderful because I very strongly felt the spiritual presence in the monastery. Also, being silent, by the way, is a tremendous help in I don't know how to put it, but lowering the wall between us and the spiritual world. And so I was like in seventh heaven, when I was there, and I kept going back. But then when I went back for essentially a come and see, a real vocation discernment, God made it very clear that that wasn't for me. And basically, I couldn't stand it. I mean, in other words, I loved it when I was flirting with it. But when it was like, okay, are you going to get engaged? I was like, I couldn't stand it.
Couldn't do it.
With the thought that every day for the rest of my life would be that. And it was, it was a great place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there.
I understand. So how did you end up making your way to Catholicism? Because, up until this point, you're pretty much still, you couldn't be brought into it kicking and screaming. So what changed?
The time in the Carthusian monastery, actually.
It really just kind of, yeah.
I felt the identity between the Catholic Church and the Blessed Virgin Mary. And I felt how the Blessed Virgin Mary is the animating spirit of the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church is like the institutional structure around the Blessed Virgin Mary. And where you have one, you have the other. And where you don't have one, you don't have the other.
Indeed. I love hearing this testimony. Like I said, I recall hearing it a while back, but I appreciate you refreshing my memory and also introducing for any of our viewers and listeners who aren't familiar with it. Thank you for telling us about that. I want to pass it over here to William for a minute to ask a few questions, and then I'll come back and ask you some more.
Yeah, you've been fantastic. Hearing your testimony has been amazing. It's been really beautiful. And I guess looking at it from my perspective, we came into the church very differently. I came into the church, kicking and screaming as well. But for me, having come in from a Protestant background, it took me a little bit of time to really embrace Mary. But you embraced her from the get-go. Could that be because really Mary is, the imagery of Mary as being the typical young Jewish woman, you were able to connect a lot of the theology of Mariology, really, with the Old Testament that does come from the Jews? Did any of that, I imagine that must have played a huge role, whereas people that come in from Protestantism really are lacking that beauty that you would have been aware of. Yes.
Zero. It played absolutely no role. I'm sorry. First, your balloon there played no role at all. However, a personal encounter with her blew everything away.
But you were able to make that connection afterwards, right?
No, I knew it was her during it. I knew it was her.
Amazing. And now that you've gone back and you've looked at the Old Testament, because I know you're big on typology, and you really, I imagine it's come to life for you now.
The Old Testament.
Right, where we've got references of Mary, particularly the Proto-Evangelium, Genesis 3. I'm sure the whole Bible has come to life to you now that you have a greater appreciation for our Blessed Mother.
Well, the Bible has come to life. Frankly, I hope it's the Holy Spirit. The New Testament certainly has a lot more life in it for me than the Old Testament.
Right.
But I'd have to stop and think. I'd have to actually stop and figure that out. The wisdom literature has certainly come to life a lot. It's really hard to get life out of Leviticus. I'm sorry. Or Numbers.
I think we all agree with you.
The Psalms. The Psalms are incredible. That's one of the things, by the way, in the Carthusian monastery that lowered my resistance to Christianity. Because I'm still Jewish when I'm there the first few times. I'm still really anti-Catholic. And these monks are breaking sleep every night. They never sleep more than 3 hours at a stretch. They get up every night from like 11:30 to 2:30. And they go into the choir in the chapel. And they chant psalms for, 2 hours.
Beautiful.
In the middle of the night. Yeah, beautiful if you don't have to do it.
Right.
Really, this stuff sounds very romantic, but it means you get up every night at 11:30.
That can be quite exhausting.
And then again at 6, it's really not easy. But anyway, so I'd be there because after a while I started joining them, and I'm, there at like 12:30. All I want to do is go back to bed, of course. And I'm looking around, and there are these, largely old men standing there chanting, "Oh, Jerusalem, if I ever forget you, let my tongue cleave through the roof of my mouth." And, "Oh, Zion, there's no place on earth more beautiful than you." I'm looking around saying to myself, these guys all want to be Jews. So, the Psalms are the prayer of the church. Oh, yeah. I don't know if any of your viewers, but the divine office, which every priest and every religious, which means every monk and every nun, every sister and every brother in the world has to say the divine office under pain of sin. And the divine office is like 95% Old Testament Psalms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, no doubt about that. Incredibly, you point that out. Earlier, you brought up, the one great thing about the show we do here is we delve into controversial topics. We will definitely delve into them. We have no problem talking about them. So I do want to ask you something. Maybe get your thoughts, because within Catholicism, as you said, as you implied, and as I agree, sometimes apologetics can do a lot more harm than good when you try to answer away certain things. And one area that I've always had curiosity about is I've read conflicting things, particularly about Pope Pius XII. Do you have anything in particular that you know exactly where I'm going? And the reason I ask you, very interesting. The reason I ask you is because I've given a number of Catholic tours in Germany, and the mindset over there, the climate over there in Germany when you bring him up is definitely not a positive one.
Oh, interesting.
It's not a positive one in terms of some people saying, well, you know what, did he do enough to help the Jews? Did he do anything to help the Jews? And then, there's a few fraction that will say, well, you know what, there's evidence that he really did, that he truly did try to do a lot for the Jewish people. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you say, what are my thoughts on it? I'd sort of like that question to be, well, what's the truth of the situation?
Yes, what's the truth?
And I'll do modesty. The way that I would put it is that first, until the United States entered World War II, which was quite late in the process, Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany in 1933, and when did the U.S. enter? Maybe 45 or something?
It was a little bit before that, but it was late. It was rather late.
I don't know, but it's certainly in the 40s.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So you had the Third Reich for a long time.
Yeah.
Before the United States got involved.
Yeah. And Britain needed help. By the time we got in, Britain already needed help. So it had been a while.
Oh yeah, they were on their knees. Everyone was on their knees. Basically, everyone in Europe, until the United States entered, it was a foregone conclusion that Europe would be under the Third Reich for decades. Yep. Maybe more than that, maybe for half a century. There was no hope, really. Yay, United States. Make America great again. Anyway, I've read Pius XII's, I don't know this, but it's probably about 20 years ago now, the Vatican released a huge trove of documents of Pius XII during World War II. And a Jesuit scholar, Pierre Blett, put together a 12-volume set of these documents. And he also wrote a 1-volume, but still substantial, maybe 600 or 700 pages, kind of summary of those 12 volumes. And I read that. I read a lot of documents, signed by Pius XII, a lot of letters signed by Pius XII. Wow. There's no doubt that he, like everybody else in Europe, thought that Europe would be under the Third Reich for decades. Yep. And what was Pius XII's number one job? It was preserving the church, preserving the sacraments, and saving souls, even for 30 or 40 or 50 years under the Third Reich. So my take on the situation is, did Pius XII care more about saving Jewish lives or about saving the survival of the church for decades under Nazi rule? I think the latter. Is that a sin or is that a virtue? You tell me. It seems to me that was his job, was to protect the church, protect the sacraments, and protect the salvation of everyone to the extent he could, and particularly of Catholics. That was his job. I don't think there's any Jewish rabbi who would have expected, some Jewish leader to care more about the fate of Catholics than the survival of Jews and Judaism. So anyway, so that's that. Am I damning Pius XII or am I exculpating him? You tell me.
That is a very, very interesting perspective because you're offering fantastic insight, and we greatly appreciate it because I enjoy your tone, your honesty. You're being completely honest. At the end of the day, I've had issues really coming to a conclusion. I've read a number of these things, not as much as you. Wow, you've read a lot of them. I've read certain letters from people that were quote unquote working behind the scenes that made claims that he had done a lot behind the scenes. But how do we really know that when we've got you don't even have a first-hand source there? You've got sometimes second and sometimes third-hand.
No, there are a lot of first-hand sources. There are a lot of first-hand sources.
That he did a lot for the Jewish people?
They're first-hand sources. The thing is, again, you can't make it binary like that. He did a lot for individual Jews.
Okay.
He did a lot for the Jews of Rome.
Okay.
He did not put the neck of the Catholic Church in Europe in the guillotine to be beheaded in order to save the Jews.
So you have read that. That's something I haven't read. So there is very good source material for that then that he did. I'm a Jew in the Catholic Church, right? I'm Johnny come lately. I'm not going to tell Catholics to go to Jewish sources to hear the Pope be badmouthed, okay? Or hear the hierarchy be badmouthed, because they're just going to say, well, you're Jewish, what do you expect, right? So I will say, go to Dietrich von Hildebrand. Do you guys know who Dietrich von Hildebrand is? Pope Benedict called him a 20th century doctor of the church. I mean, he was like, the super Catholic. He wrote a very interesting book called My Battle with Hitler, because he was very actively fighting the ascendancy of Nazism in the Catholic world during the 1930s. So read his memoirs. That's his memoirs, My Battle with Hitler. And you couldn't have a more Catholic source. And he really, it's very interesting. And he is a first-hand source, okay, because he actually started a newspaper in Vienna to oppose Hitler and to oppose the Third Reich. Okay, him. He took his life in his hands giving lectures when brown shirts, who were like the Antifa of the day, were threatening to kill him if he spoke. So he's a first-hand source. It's very interesting, and it's very clear that you can make a cartoon out of it, of black and white, but life isn't like that, and politics aren't like that, and history isn't like that. And in fact, when Hitler first came to power, he presented himself as saving Christendom against the Bolshevik, communist, atheist, Jewish menace from Russia. Yeah.
And that was his initial self-identification, his initial platform that he was sold himself on. And most of the Catholic hierarchy bought it hook, line, and sinker. And so it took them a long time to wake up.
Yeah, sure. In the beginning, they most definitely did, and that is something that many people are quite aware of. Very interesting that you pointed out those first-hand sources. I appreciate that, because all I have really examined are I have read some modern-day Jews that have said some quite positive things about him, but I'm definitely going to look deeper into what you said. I really appreciate that.
He did a lot. I mean, I think this is probably one of the sources you read, but Pinchas Lapida, who was a cabinet member of Israel, he wrote a book called, I think it was called Three Popes and the Jews, and he estimated that Pius XII was personally responsible for saving the lives of, I believe it was 780,000 Jews.
Wow.
He opened up the convents and monasteries in Rome. That what he did basically, it was against the canon law for them to let in, non-religious.
Right.
But he ordered them, or gave them permission to receive Jewish refugees and hide them. The barracks of the Swiss Guards, I forgot the number, 2,000 Jewish refugees or something, were hiding out in the barracks of the Swiss Guards. All kinds of stuff like that. However, my understanding is that he was very, very concerned and very active on an individual basis saving Jewish lives, but he did not want to jeopardize the future of the church in
Right.
should Hitler win.
Yeah.
Which
for a
was
while-
his job. It was his job.
Yeah, and for a while there, as you pointed out, it did look like Hitler was going to win.
Like for the whole time, except for the United States, despite what Antifa and whoever else might be arguing now. The world, time and time again, the world was freed from horrible, horrible, abusive totalitarianism by the charitable intervention without self-interest of the United States.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I've dialogued with historical experts that are quite aged over there in Britain, in other parts of the world, and they have no problem admitting that. You might find 18 or 20-year-old kids nowadays that will try to be rewriting history, but they're really not going to make any headway there, because what happened, and you're 100% right about that. Mm-hmm. I do want to pick your brain on one thing. Really enjoyed the conversation we've been having, in particular about Judaism and Christianity, Catholicism, if you will. This is a bit of a controversial one.
I stay away from controversy. You've noticed.
What can we do? Well, let me set the groundwork first. I'm a huge church fathers guy. Huge, I love them. Love the church fathers, and I realized that the climate of their day was perhaps quite different, very, very different. You know where I'm going. You know exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of. I have a guess. I can guess. May not be right, but I have a suspicion.
What do we make, or how do you grapple sometimes with what may seem to be rather harsh comments against Judaism that come from a rather early period? Now, I apologize if I'm really delving into really controversial statements, but I've really enjoyed speaking to you. I'm just curious how do you approach that?
You mean like the Jews are worse than wild beasts? Their synagogues are brothels and stuff like that, coming from like St. John Chrysostom? Is that like what you have in mind?
Maybe. Pretty much.
I actually, I guess there are two directions to take with that. One is being a saint has to do with one's commitment to Christ and one's dying to self and one's being totally sold out. It doesn't have much to do with one's judgment or understanding of history. So I have had to come to grips with the fact that these people are genuinely canonized saints, even though they may have had very unrealistically negative views of a certain population, like my own. So that's one dimension. I actually think there's a much deeper thing that's really neat, which is the mystery of the interplay between Jew and Gentile in the church between the first and second coming. I think is actually the kind of bottom line, solution to the mystery, because we know that a veil has been cast over the eyes of the Jews, as St. Paul says in Romans 11, lest you be wise in your own conceits, brethren, I want you to understand this mystery. A hardening has come upon part of the Jews until the full number of the Gentiles come in, and so all Israel will be saved. He talks elsewhere in Romans 11 about why God did this, but basically, God wanted Jews and Gentiles to be largely separate during the period between the first and second coming, until immediately before the second coming, the veil will be lifted and the Jews will enter the church en masse, and then the church composed of Jew and Gentile will be ready for the second coming. And this is actually it's in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The Catechism, paragraph 674, says, quote, the glorious Messiah's coming is suspended at every moment of history until his recognition by all Israel. Second coming can't happen until there's a conversion of the Jews, and this widespread conversion of the Jews is not going to happen. It's going to be a sign of the second coming. It's supposed to happen shortly before the second coming. So God veiled the eyes of the Jews to the truth of Jesus Earlier, if I remember the lines right, in Romans 11, St. Paul says, "What then? Israel failed to obtain what it sought. The elect obtained it, but the rest were hardened. As it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes that should not see and ears that should not hear, down to this very day. Let their eyes be darkened so they cannot see." Pretty mysterious, right? Let their eyes be darkened so they cannot see. So it was basically it was God's plan to keep the community separate. I actually think that Christian anti-Semitism was part of that plan, so to speak. From the Jewish side, veiling their eyes to the truth of Christ kept them separate. But from the Christian side, the antipathy towards the Jews kept them separate.
That's a great insight there. I greatly appreciate it. I'm going to ask you one more question, then toss it on over to Michael. But we really enjoyed dialoguing with you. There is one thing that I'm very curious about. So you had a personal encounter with Mary, which is amazing. Wow, beautiful. Incredibly beautiful. And you're right. She is the Queen of the Angels. What an amazing statement. Amazing truths that you were able to see. And we do know that. That the Orthodox also have great veneration for Mary. So I am curious, did Mary reveal to you that the truth was within Catholicism? I am Catholic, by the way. I have no arguments there. I just wonder, how did you know that Mary was leading you to Catholicism and maybe not Orthodox?
If I were Greek, or if I were in Russia, I probably would have become Eastern Orthodox.
Okay.
I mean, I'm ethnically Jewish. I'm not ethnically Greek. I'm not ethnically Armenian. I don't want to say you're not welcome, but all of the Orthodox congregations I've come across in the United States have an ethnic flavor to them, right? They're Ukrainian, they're Lebanese, they're whatever, they're Greek. They look at you like you have three heads. When you don't even have to be Jewish. If you're just like an American Protestant, they look like you have three heads. So I just took the path of least resistance. It's not like I said, "Oh no, the Holy Spirit doesn't proceed from how's it go? It doesn't proceed from the Father. He proceeds from both the Father and the Son, whichever it was." No, I didn't come from there. I just I'm in Massachusetts. I'm not in Vladivostok or something.
Yeah. You knew where Mary was leading you. In other words, I completely get it.
No, I wanted Mary and I wanted the Eucharist. And if you live in Massachusetts, you got to be Catholic for that.
Right. Incredible. Very good insight. Greatly appreciate it. I'll toss it back over to Michael and hopefully pick your brain again in a little bit.
Let me just say, I have to go at about the half hour, after about an hour from the show. So
sure. No problem. We're at 43 minutes in. How much time do you have left?
Figure an hour.
Okay,
I planned on an hour.
Sure. So just a couple more questions, and then we'll maybe if you have time and are willing, maybe a couple chat questions. So one of the questions that I have is, could you maybe speak to the relationship between Judaism and Christianity? Do you think that, is Christianity the fulfillment of Judaism, I should say?
I go further. I think the Catholic Church, it's the sacraments, sacramental Christianity is the fulfillment of Judaism. Judaism is extremely sacramental. You had all that animal sacrifice. You had all of those rules for ritual purity. You have all of those purification rituals and everything. So I'd say sacramental Christianity is the fulfillment of Judaism. Yeah.
Yeah, and could you also, because I imagine a lot of people are not familiar with it. It's called the Association of Hebrew Catholics. I see, of course, you're a member, at least one of the individuals mentioned there.
I don't think I am a member.
Oh, okay. I saw you on the website. Could you maybe speak about the importance of Jews in the Catholic Church today, especially when it comes to evangelizing Jews? Are there any good ministries out there? I mean, I mentioned the Association of Hebrew Catholics. Are there others?
You just made like a stew of several vegetables and several meats all stirred together. The Association of Hebrew Catholics is not into evangelization. They won't have anything to do with evangelization. So they're not an example of evangelization in that sense. There's an old saying, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, and that's certainly the case between me and the Association of Hebrew Catholics. I love the president. I love the existence of the Association of Hebrew Catholics, but I do have problems with some of the underlying theology, such as not encouraging evangelization. So I don't know. You don't really want me. Do you want me to talk about the Association of Hebrew Catholics?
Well, and talk about that, and also why is there a hesitation to evangelize Jews?
Yeah. See, this is really deep. It's there's so many layers of this, going from the totally spiritual to the not very spiritual. But basically, most Jews, including Jews in the Catholic Church, feel that their vocation is tied up with being Jewish. And that not only that, actually it's more than that, that Jewish identity is important to God, is what it amounts to. And therefore, the issue is whether, when a Jew enters the Catholic Church, should he or she shed her Jewish identity, or should he or she be a Jew in the Catholic Church? And that presents a tremendous spectrum.
I think may have lost you there. William, are you able to hear me still? In fact, I can't hear you, but I can see you talking. I can't see Roy speaking there.
That was my bad. I had it on mute.
I can hear you now. Okay, good deal. Just making sure it wasn't on my end. Sometimes
no, it definitely is not on your end. So. I believe he might have lost a connection there.
Yeah, I hope he comes back, because I really want to be able to talk about that, because there is a hesitancy on part of some in the Catholic Church who are ethnically Jewish when it comes to evangelizing. So he's touching on a really, really important topic here. And then I also want to get into the document from the Vatican. I think it was a few years back, where it's the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. It caused quite a stir, because there's some aspects to it that seem to indicate that Jews aren't to be evangelized.
Right. Yeah, and I would love to take his brain on that.
That's absurd.
It is very absurd.
A lot of people want to take this position. No, leave the Jews as they are. As if there's 2 ways of being saved. As if there's for Gentiles, it's through the church. For Jews, it's through ethnic Judaism and through obeying the Torah and through what we would call Judaism today.
Unfortunately, you have clergy pushing that. What you just said, which doesn't make any sense at all. But he's definitely somebody who I want to bounce that off of. Hopefully, he does come back on.
Yeah, and I want to hear more about the Association of Hebrew Catholics, because I haven't heard that they were hesitating when it comes to evangelizing Jews. That's very sad to hear, because they would be in the perfect position to do just that, because they're generally ethnic Jews who came into the Catholic Church, so they are in the very best position to evangelize. Let me see.
There we go.
I think we lost you.
I have a very bad internet connection here.
Not a problem at all. But if you could maybe talk to us just a little bit where you left off. We were talking here about evangelizing Jews, and some say that this is taboo and it shouldn't be done.
It's not that even the Association of Hebrew Catholics doesn't per se say it shouldn't be done. It's just that they don't want to. They don't want to do.
They just don't want to do it. I got you.
The thing is. The Association of Hebrew Catholics, before they evangelize Jews, let's say, would like to see there be a way for Jews in the Catholic Church to maintain their Jewish identity. And they're a little bit concerned that since there isn't a mechanism for them to maintain their Jewish identity, that once they enter the Catholic Church, they, and especially their children, cease being Jewish. and they feel that God wants Jewish identity. I don't want to say ethnic identity, Jewish spiritual identity to continue, even in the Catholic Church. So they're more concerned with making that possible than they are with evangelizing Jews until it is possible.
So, having seders and stuff like that in the church, is that something that you would be against or for? What is?
Well, I do it. I mean, I do, a half a dozen or a dozen every Lent. So I know this is the reason why I have reservations about being a member of the Association of Hebrew Catholics. I'm all for the evangelization of the Jews, and I'm happy to let God sort out how he's going to, maintain Jewish identity in the church. That's not my problem. The Great Commission, right? The Great Commission is go out and make disciples all nations, beginning in Jerusalem, not except Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So I figure that my job, I'm in sales. That's a management problem.
The controversy, I remember Augustine and Jerome going back and forth discussing, somebody who is ethnically Jewish converting to the church, are they still able to keep the law, or should they not keep the law? And they were kind of going back and forth on that. What's the truth of the matter here?
I didn't know that.
They went back and forth, and
what do they do with St. Paul? I mean, St. Paul makes it very clear that the law was a schoolmaster until you reached majority or whatever, adulthood, and you leave behind the schoolmaster. Yeah,
and it seems that Florence kind of, if I'm reading it correctly, the Council of Florence, ended up kind of weighing in that direction. If I understand it correctly, that's just my private.
St. Thomas Aquinas said it's a mortal sin for a Jew in the church to observe any of the Jewish traditions or feasts or laws.
So how does that work with having seders? I think you said that you had
St. Thomas Aquinas, despite my good friends who are professors of Thomism, is actually not dogma. Not necessarily dogma.
Right.
It's not established as dogma because St. Thomas Aquinas said it.
Sure. And when we talk a lot about
he said that Mary wasn't immaculately conceived.
Right. Yeah, there are some
I have to pull that out all the time.
Sure. I also take, I guess I would have more of a reformed view of Thomism in some matters. There's some other things I would also maybe say that some others who came after Thomas perhaps developed things a little bit better than he did. But let me ask you one other question here, because I know you're pressed for time.
Okay, but no, I would say that if you want to go to chats, make this the last question that comes from you, and because I like to respond to real people too, not just like super celebrities like you.
Sure. Not a problem. Could you briefly comment about the Vatican document, the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable? Do you think this was a good document or bad?
What document is that?
This was a few years ago, and it was kind of controversial because some were saying that the Vatican was effectively saying in this document that Jews are not to be evangelized or not to be proselytized.
I mean, I know documents that say that, like Reflections on Covenant and Mission. I'm surprised because I thought I would have had name recognition of a document that was so relevant, but the gifts and the call of God are irrevocable.
And this is a reflection of this is Commission for Religious Relations with the Jews. It's on the Vatican website. It's on the 50th anniversary of Nostra Aetate, and there was a part in there that a lot of people were concerned.
So that's not Reflections on Covenant and Mission.
Reflection on theological.
Oh no, not 50, because that was before 50th anniversary. No.
This is a little different.
Is 2001. So no. Anyway, I think. I'm sorry. Anyway, I should be, but I'm not familiar per se with the document.
Yeah, but I think we kind of get your answer anyway. You would still say that Catholics should.
Come on, I mean, what about Jesus? What did Jesus say? Do you realize that everyone Jesus ever evangelized in his life was a Jew?
Right.
When he sent out his disciples, he said, "Go nowhere among the towns of the Samaritans and Gentiles. Go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel."
Right. Yeah,
You
kind
know,
of a
he would have died of old age in bed if he didn't believe that the Jews needed the gospel.
this
Wasn't he
question,
crucified for evangelizing Romans, you know?
right? That's a very good point. This one is a question from Patrick. What do you make of the idea of the third temple in Jerusalem being built as a sign of the end times? Can we expect this as Catholics?
I don't think you can actually because one of the reasons Protestants, when you say sign of the end times, that's a little bit ambiguous because it might precipitate Armageddon. So does that make it a sign of the end times? If it brings about, you know, the final war that requires the second coming to put it to bed. But this is a problem introduced by the non-sacramental nature of Protestantism, because we know that the animal sacrifice of Old Testament Judaism was replaced. It wasn't replaced by the sacrifice of the Mass. It was simply a placeholder for the sacrifice of the Mass. And that Jesus' sacrifice on the cross and the reparticipation in that at every Mass is the fulfillment of the animal sacrifice of Judaism. So, you know, there's no possible sacramental role to animal sacrifice after the cross. But, you know, Protestants have a much, well, you guys, or at least William, you were Protestant, so you know much better than me. But the feeling that I get is that they get confused about the need for the temple to be rebuilt, because they think somehow the Old Testament sacrificial system is of value to God.
Kind of talking along this line, Knight 1212 asks about the miracle of the scarlet thread. Could you maybe comment on this briefly?
Sure, it's really neat, and it's recounted both in the Zohar, which is like the book of Kabbalah, and it's also recounted in the Talmud. And they both recount the following, which is that in the days when the temple stood, Yom Kippur is the highest holiday of the year. It is the Day of Atonement. It's like, you know, it's like Lent and Good Friday smushed into one. It's the one day of the year for, I don't want to overstate it, but it's more or less, it's a culmination of the contrition, the begging for forgiveness of sins, and the remission of sins for the year in Judaism. And it's the only day of the year that the high priest would enter the Holy of Holies to offer sacrifice. And when he did so, he would offer sacrifice for the remission of the sins of the Jewish nation. And the Talmud and the Zohar recount that before he did so every Yom Kippur, a scarlet thread or cord would be hung around the entry to the Holy of Holies. And the nation of Israel would gather outside with their eyes on this scarlet thread. And when the high priest offered the sacrifice, if it was accepted by God for the remission of sins of the Jewish nation, that scarlet thread would miraculously turn white, at which point the Jews assembled outside would burst into celebration because their sins were forgiven. It almost always, again, the Talmud says this miracle almost always occurred. Once in a blue moon, it wouldn't occur. And the Jews would have to wait until the following Yom Kippur to have their sins remitted, if their sins were particularly grave. But the Talmud also recounts that about 40 years before the destruction of the temple, this miracle ceased to occur and never occurred again. The destruction of the temple was about 70 to 72 AD. 40 years before the destruction of the temple is the crucifixion. So the Talmud itself, despite itself, says that God no longer accepted the animal sacrifice of Old Testament Judaism after Jesus died on the cross.
Very curious.
Very
Do you have
curious.
time for one more?
Just one more. Let me just say, obviously this is my bread and butter. This is my shtick. You know, this is what I do. I have a website, salvationisfromthejews.com. I have a YouTube channel. I have a podcast. You know, I have all the normal stuff. I have a radio show, weekly radio show on Radio Maria. If you spell my name right, Schoeman, there. Yeah, I used to be a
Yes.
marketing professor. I should do better than this. But anyway, Schoeman. And you put that into YouTube search, or you put that into Google or something, Roy Schoeman, spelled right. You'll find all this stuff. And I've got hundreds of talks. You'll get bored to tears. I get emails from people who say, I love your talks. I listen to them and I immediately fall asleep. I listen to them every night to fall asleep. But anyway, I have all this stuff. I have videos, all these topics, all the topics that you brought up, the history of the church teaching about Judaism, Catholic anti-Semitism, what the Talmud says about Jesus, all of these things. And so I have this book. Oh yeah, I forgot to advertise this book, which has, it has chapters on all this stuff too, including chapter on, it talks about the miracle of the scarlet thread, that talks about Nazi anti-Christianity and Nazi anti-Semitism and so forth. So I know I'm limiting myself to an hour, or maybe it's going to be like an hour and 10 minutes on the show. But if you're not sick of me already, there's lots more opportunity to get sick of me.
And I'm going to put a link to the book and also your show and your YouTube page in the description once this posts. So everybody look for that there. This last one here. Does your Jewish background impact how you view the liturgy?
My Jewish background meant that I was immediately comfortable with the Tridentine Rite. The Carthusians, by the way, have their own rite, but it dates from the 11th century, so it's basically like the Tridentine Rite. Because Judaism has a tremendous sense of the sacred, of the holiness of sacred objects, of the separation between the secular and the sacred, which has been lost in Protestantism, which doesn't have much sacramental component. And which has even been lost in most Novus Ordo manifestations of Catholicism. So it indirectly just meant that when I entered the Catholic Church, I was more naturally at home in monastic communities and in old-fashioned, let's say, Catholicism than I was in clown and balloon masses. Not that
I don't think any of us here are fans of the clown masses.
Not at all. No way.
Most of us, I think, like the Tridentine Mass or the Eastern liturgies. I've never come across anybody who said that they liked the clown masses and the Novus Ordo.
No.
Hopefully nobody's will, but you never know.
Well,
but
anyway, them as viewers if you did.
You know what? They probably would have lost them anyway. With some of the things we say out here, I think we would have already lost them. But
lost them a long time ago.
But anyways, Mr. Schoeman, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you. This was excellent. Again, like I said, everybody, I'm going to put the links to the book and the YouTube channel and also Roy's page there, the radio show. So please look for that in the description. You're welcome on the show anytime. I love this.
Good.
Great.
I'll send you the email. This isn't really something for public consumption, but I'm making it something for public consumption. I'd love just the audio of this show. I don't need the video.
Sure.
Now. There's too much sunlight reflecting off all of our heads.
The
audio I could really use.
Absolutely, I can get that to you.
Okay,
no
thanks.
problem. I'll get it to you in a MP3 if that'll work for you. All right, very good. Well, again, thank you for coming on. You're welcome on anytime. Everybody go check out Roy Schoeman's material and also his book. It's on Amazon.com. Is that the best place to go? Or
cheapest place.
Ignatius Press.
It's in bookstores too and everything. It's Ignatius Press.
Yes.
So, maybe you want to support your local Catholic bookstore if you still have one, but you definitely save a few bucks, and it comes in a day or two if you order it from Amazon.
Yeah. Yep. Good deal. All right. Well, thank you for coming on. Everybody, thank you for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe, and share this on your social media. Until next time, God bless you.